Brain, the mass of nerve tissue in the anterior end of an organism. The brain integrates sensory information and directs motor responses. In higher vertebrates, it is also the center of learning. The human brain weighs approximately 1.4 kilograms, 3 pounds, and is made up of billions of cells called neurons. Junctions between neurons, known as synapses, enable electrical and chemical messages to be transmitted from one neuron to the next in the brain, a process that underlies basic sensory functions and that is critical to learning, memory and thought formation, and other cognitive activities. The cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is the part of the brain that functions to make human beings unique. Distinctly human traits, including higher thought, language, and human consciousness as well as the ability to think, reason and imagine all originate in the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is what we see when we look at the brain. It is the outermost portion that can be divided into the four lobes of the brain. The four lobes. The cerebral cortex can be divided into four sections, which are known as lobes. The frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe have been associated with different functions ranging from reasoning to auditory perception. 1. Frontal lobe. As indicated by their name, they're located in the front part of the brain. They coordinate high-level behaviors, such as motor skills, problem-solving, judgment, planning, and attention. The frontal lobes also manage emotions and impulse control. At the back of the frontal lobe, near the central sulcus, lies the motor cortex. The motor cortex receives information from various lobes of the brain and utilizes this information to carry out body movements. Damage to the frontal lobe can lead to changes in sexual habits, socialization, and attention as well as increased risk-taking. 2. Parietal lobe. The parietal lobe is located in the middle section of the brain and is associated with processing tactile sensory information such as pressure, touch, and pain. A portion of the brain known as the somatosensory cortex is located in this lobe and is essential to the processing of the body's senses. 3. Temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is located on the bottom section of the brain. They coordinate specific functions, including visual memory, such as facial recognition, verbal memory, such as understanding language, and interpreting the emotions and reactions of others. The hippocampus is also located in the temporal lobe, which is why this portion of the brain is also heavily associated with the formation of memories. Damage to the temporal lobe can lead to problems with memory, speech perception, and language skills. 4. Occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is located at the back portion of the brain and is associated with interpreting visual stimuli and information. They're heavily involved in the ability to read and recognize printed words, along with other aspects of vision. Damage to this lobe can cause visual problems such as difficulty recognizing objects, and inability to identify colors, and trouble recognizing words. The brain stem. The brain stem is comprised of the midbrain, pons, and medulla. Midbrain. The midbrain is often considered the smallest region of the brain. It acts as a sort of relay station for auditory and visual information. The midbrain controls many important functions such as the visual and auditory systems as well as eye movement. Portions of the midbrain called the red nucleus and the substantia nigra are involved in the control of body movement. The darkly pigmented substantia nigra contains a large number of dopamine-producing neurons are located. The degeneration of neurons in the substantia nigra is associated with Parkinson's disease. Medulla. The medulla is located directly above the spinal cord in the lower part of the brain stem and controls many vital autonomic functions such as heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure. Pons. The pons connects the cerebral cortex to the medulla and to the cerebellum and serves a number of important functions, including playing a role in several autonomic functions such as stimulating breathing and controlling sleep cycles. The cerebellum. Sometimes referred to as the little brain, the cerebellum lies on top of the pons behind the brain stem. The cerebellum is comprised of small lobes and receives information from the balance system of the inner ear, sensory nerves, and the auditory and visual systems. T's involved with fine motor skills, which refers to the coordination of smaller, or finer, movements, especially those involving the hands and feet. It also helps the body maintain its posture, equilibrium, and balance. The cerebellum makes up approximately 10% of the brain's total size, but it accounts for more than 50% of the total number of neurons located in the entire brain. This structure is associated with motor movement and control, but this in the body to act together and produce coordinated fluid movement. In addition to playing an essential role in motor control, the cerebellum is also important in certain cognitive functions, including speech. The thalamus. Located above the brainstem, the thalamus processes and transmits movement and sensory information. It is essentially a relay station, taking in sensory information and then passing it on to the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex also sends information to the thalamus, which then sends this information to other systems. The hypothalamus is a grouping of nuclei that lie along the base of the brain near the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus connects with many other regions of the brain and is responsible for controlling hunger, thirst, emotions, body temperature regulation, and circadian rhythms. The hypothalamus also controls the pituitary gland by secreting hormones. This gives the hypothalamus a great deal of control over many body functions. The limbic system. Although there is no totally agreed upon list of the structures that make up the limbic system, 4 of the main regions include amygdala, hippocampus, regions of the limbic cortex, septal area. These structures form connections between the limbic system and the hypothalamus, thalamus and cerebral cortex. The hippocampus is important in memory and learning, while the limbic system itself is central in the control of emotional responses. The basal ganglia. The basal ganglia are a group of large nuclei that partially surround the thalamus. These nuclei are important in the control of movement.